Welcome to my critical thinking skills video. We're going to talk about or explain critical thinking and critical thinking skills. If you've never heard the phrase till now, or you have heard it and lost track of it, critical thinking, to me, the definition has always had two completely different meanings. One is critical thinking, and that it is thinking that is so important that is critical in nature. The other is it is the sort of thing that you be very critical of. You be somewhat suspicious, skeptical. But in other words, you examine what you hear, you examine information, and you look for a couple things. In this video, one of the things that I'm going to stress is that words have definition. If you are using words and the definition doesn't match what the words are pertaining to, it's a good idea to find a definition that works and that is correct and that you can hang your hat on. First word that we're going to look for a definition that you have to live by is truth. Truth defines itself. There is no such thing as a half-truth or an alternative truth. Truth defines itself, and it's not negotiable. There's frequently an argument made that there are two positions on some specific point. One group says one thing, another group says another, and the truth must lie somewhere in the middle. That is not the case. Truth is where truth is. It could be anywhere in that particular parameter, but it's up to you, the critical thinker, to do the diligence it's going to take to find out what the truth really is. We're going to get to that in a minute. The other word you're going to have to live with and live with the definition and embrace it is reality. There is no such thing as a false reality, a virtual reality. Those are marketing terms. Reality, just like truth, defines itself. You cannot negotiate reality. It is as it is. You can accept it, you can recognize it, or you can ignore it, or you may distort it, but the reality never changes. It can't change, otherwise it's not reality. A case that is frequently made is that people thought at one time the earth was flat, and that was their reality. Okay, that was not their reality, that was their error or ignorance, to take your pick. But the truth of the matter is the earth is round, and it has never been flat. The perception and knowledge led them to make that conclusion erroneously, but the reality was it's round, and the reality has never changed. That's the point. So in critical thinking skills, you're going to look for truth and reality, and you're going to have to accept the fact that they are not variables. And it's you, the critical thinker, who has to take the steps you're going to need to take to get to the truth or to find out what reality is. By the way, critical thinking has a close cousin called the scientific method. Scientific method is a lot more rigid in what it will accept as information towards the truth. However, the method is very similar, just critical thinking doesn't quite have the rigidity that the scientific method does. If you see what's up behind me, you see a famous phrase ascribed to Carl Sagan that says, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." I have a slight variation on that as I say extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Proof to me is a little bit more demanding than evidence. You can have a mountain of evidence. Proof usually is conclusive and you don't need to build such a strong case. However, that thinking has to be embraced. If you're given information and you're a critical thinker, the information is step one. Right? You now have something to investigate. Step two is going to be the hard part. It's where you're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to take your very first step towards determining what in fact is the truth or what is reality. A case that actually two cases I'm going to present to you, you are probably familiar with, and they're good examples of critical thinking, and if you've had a shortfall in your critical thinking, what you probably have gotten yourself into. The two cases, the first case I'm going to talk about is a trial of O.J. Simpson, or referred to as the O.J. Simpson murder trial. If you recall, the case ended with O.J. Simpson being acquitted. The jury found him not guilty. You may have an opinion at this point, and I'm going to stress the word opinion because if you haven't read the entire trial transcript, you have no way of knowing how the jury came to its conclusion. The jury concluded that the state did not provide enough evidence to give the conviction of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So you will have to read the entire transcript to be knowledgeable enough to form an opinion based on the reality of what took place as evidence in the trial. That's going to take some time. It's a lot of work, and you may not want to do that. All right, you may just decide, oh heck, I think he was guilty, and that's all I'm going to think about. All right, that's all I care about. That gives you two problems, and it creates two traps. The first problem you've got is you apparently don't have enough faith, or you're about to lose faith in our legal system, that the jury got it wrong. The jury acquitted a man who convicted a crime, and there's apparently a flaw in our legal system that allows this to happen. All right. So if you're going to just based on an opinion and believe that the jury erred, then I'm going to give you the next problem you're going to have, because this is going to show you not only if your critical thinking skills aren't working, it's also going to show you what your biases are, and that you're operating off biases rather than critical thinking. The next trial I'm going to throw out there is the Rodney King trial of the police officers who were tried with various crimes for the apparent beating they gave Rodney after they arrested him. I'm going to be pretty sure that just like the O.J. Simpson trial, you have an opinion as to whether or not the police were guilty or innocent. The jury found them not guilty, right? So the jury decided that the state did not present enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to convict the police officers. Okay, now here's where your problem comes in, all right? Just previously from the O.J. Simpson trial, you were of the opinion that you have a flawed legal system because the jury got it wrong. But now we have another trial that was again a jury trial, but this time the jury got it right. Okay, so is the system flawed or is it not? You're creating your own problem in that, your own stress point. But in any case, if just like in the O.J. Simpson trial, you'll have to read the entire transcript of what took place, what evidence was presented, and basically put yourself in the same position as a juror and decide whether or not it's guilt or innocence. Right? If you don't take the steps, and you got to admit it's a lot of work to read those transcripts, but if you don't, you have no information, you have no evidence, you have nothing other than an opinion. Right? And if that's how you want to do everything, that's fine. But there are people that you will run into that will recognize your opinion as being grossly flawed because they may have read the transcripts and they saw whether or not, in fact, the jury got it right. The next case that we're going to talk about is in critical thinking skills, words have meaning, and you have to embrace and accept the meaning and omit variable definitions that just confuse things. You want to avoid generalizations as much as possible. I'll give you a phrase that's commonly held to be true by a number of people, and the phrase is, the less government, the better. Right? Two problems right off the bat with the phrase is it uses two non-defining words. It uses less, which is a non-specific amount, and better, which is non-specific quality. If you're going to use English language and you believe the less government, the better, then a continuation of that logic says that no government would be the best, right? If you want to embrace that thinking, I will show you a few countries in Africa where, in fact, no government is the case. and you might want to take a look at how they're doing to decide whether or not that's really the way you want to go with this, right? In any case, it's a generality, and it's based on two general points, less and better, right? They're both undefined. Being non-specific, if you try and apply specifics to them, you run into a problem. Let's take, for instance, the entire history of this country, from 1776 to today. We will show on a timeline from 1776 till now what our government's expenditures were, what their employee numbers were, what facilities they held, and basically all the dynamics of government from 1776 till today graphed. We'll overlay on that graph the GDP of this country from 1776 to today. And I will invite any one of you to go up to the graph as it's displayed and point to anywhere along that graph and say, this is when the government was just the right size. Right? Clearly, unless you have a PhD in economics and probably a master's degree in history, there's no way you can go to that line and point to it with definitive knowledge and say this was when the government was exactly the right size. Even if you did have the PhD in economics, you would have a heck of a time pointing to any one spot and coming up with a valid case as to why that was the best, right? So the problem with it is the generality is embraced because you get to plug in your own definitions to less and better, right? It's a very non-specific term, but here's the problem with it and why it gets you nowhere. If you have an issue with government, it is almost certainly a specific issue. Either you pay too much in taxes, you have poor services where you live, you may have corruption. The list goes on and on and on of the facets of government that you may have issues with. All right? If you're going to make a statement about the improprieties or the inadequacies of government, be specific. Spell it out, because then you can address the specific point. Right? If you say, again, that the less government, the better, and someone says, yes, I'm going to make sure government gets smaller, they're basically ringing your bell by saying the same stupid thing that you just mentioned in the first place. You said you want less is better, and he says, well, I'm going to make it smaller. Okay, so we got three generalities competing with each other. Bad idea. The lowest form of logic and critical thinking skill are the conspiracy theory. Unlike Carl Sagan, who demands evidence in proportion to the claim, critical thinkers would recognize immediately that conspiracy theorists say there is evidence, but it's being kept out of the public domain or suppressed or hidden or whatever. That in fact there is a case, a legitimate case, but it's being kept away. Right? Don't fall into that one either. Anytime you hear a conspiracy theory, take 10 steps backward, make a right turn, and leave the room. In any case, the next video is going to be on if your critical thinking skills are failing you or you've left them behind. I will explain what it will cost you, what it will lead to, and the traps it creates for you. It's a domino effect type thing, and see you next time. Bye.